Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Cedar Falls Board of Education with a reminder that the actions taken at this table this evening will focus on our students and their achievement. With that, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved by Jenny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. Any questions or comments?
There's one comment that I would make. If you look down underneath agreements, there is one agreement that's somewhat unusual with Iowa State University. It's a cooperative agreement. We typically do not have agreements with Iowa State, especially since we are what we would affectionately call Panther Country. But we do in this case because it's one of them is a program area that UNI does not offer, family consumer science. And the other one actually is a unique circumstance where Iowa State reached out to UNI to ask permission before they even contacted us. So this was done certainly with intent, but also we wanted to make sure we brought that to the attention of the entire board in case there are individuals in the community that have questions about that. So it is unique, but certainly under these circumstances warranted.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Moving on now to item C on the agenda, the public comment. We have two this evening. Dan, would you please come forward to the mic and introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is Dan McDonald. Work for Teamsters, business agent for a lot of the areas here in the area, to include the school. I just wanted to read off a little statement and then kind of leave it at that. Cedar Falls School District and Teamsters have had a long-standing good relationship together. Any issues that have come up, we have been able to work through together to resolve them. All the workers understand what is expected of them, and they do it. They show up for work, do their job, and don't create issues. I could say with the possible changes to the bargaining rights of these workers, they aren't happy at all. I hope the school board and administration considers leaving all the permissive items. A happy worker is a productive worker. I refer back to an old saying of, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. The agreement in place is not broke. There is no reason to change it except for the reason we can, so we will. Just because someone else does something doesn't mean you have to. My mother always told me as I was growing up, if someone jumps off a cliff, does that mean you have to too? Just because you could do something does not mean you should. There's many things people can do, but does not mean they should. I'm going to give an example. Please don't take it out of context. There's absolutely no intent behind it or anything, but Iowa has an open carry law for weapons. Just because you can openly carry a weapon, does that mean you should put a bunch of weapons on you, go walking into Walmart? I don't think so. Not a good idea. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Cedar Falls School District, its employees, and the Teamsters have always had a good working relationship for many years, and we want to continue that good working relationship. I fear the possible changes will have a negative effect on the workers. Please consider leaving all permissive items and only remove the excluded items that must be removed by law, and let's all negotiate in good faith to continue to have a working environment all of us can be happy and proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Next we have Steve.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Feist. I work preventative maintenance for Cedar Falls Schools. Just with Dan, I'm coming to you today to voice some of my concerns about our possible new contract. My concern is that it might be stripped of items that both sides have worked very hard over many years to come to an agreement that helps all involved. The workers and the school district have worked hard over many years to negotiate a contract that was not only fair for its workers, but fair for the district as well. Out of the 45 people this contract represents, 16 employees have or have had children attend or graduate from Cedar Falls schools. 13 employees have attended or have graduated from Cedar Falls schools. 7 employees have both attended and or graduated from Cedar Falls schools and have had or have children attend or graduate from Cedar Falls schools. The average year of service to the district by our current union members is 14 years. 3 out of the 5 employees with most years of service to the district average 36 years. The point that I'm making by giving you this information is that we're not solely employees of the school district. We're graduates of Cedar Falls schools, parents, grandparents of graduates, or current students, or both. Our members are not only invested in Cedar Falls School District, but in the community as well. I believe that our management team, administrators, school board members, value the workers and value the work that we do and generally care about the well-being of the workers. A concern I have is that without a complete contract, there's room for favoritism. I'm certainly not saying that anyone in this room is going to be doing that, but it does open that possibility up for the future. I've worked at non-union jobs before. One in particular is the reason why I'm working here now, where we have a contract. Employees were fired if management didn't like them. Management and managers promoted friends to higher paying positions rather than employees that were much more qualified and deserving. Managers wasted lots of hours trying to resolve petty personal issues between employees because employees were so afraid of being fired, they would try to make their other coworkers look bad. And the biggest issue was the revolving door of new hires that were nothing more than warm body and seat fillers. That company spent a large part of their time and budget hiring and training new employees. The company devalued the jobs of the employees and in turn dehumanized the employees. The question that the district needs to ask itself, do you value the people that clean and maintain the schools that your friends, families, neighbors, children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews go to? We do. We don't ask for much, just to be treated fair and be given fair wages and benefits for our work and to have a contract with all of our benefits listed in it so we know what we have. I really thank you guys for taking the time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve and Dan, both of you.
Thank you.
Moving on now to communications. Arlo, student representative.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Hey, Arlo.
So since our last meeting, Student Senate has kind of been figuring out what we are going to be doing for this last quarter of the school year. So I'll kind of talk about these events in more detail as we approach that date and, have the plan solidified. But I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of what's coming up. So this quarter, we will be doing our annual spring service events, which includes the school blood drive and our teacher appreciation breakfast that we hold at the end of the year. We're also going to be planning a new service project with Earth Day, which is going to be a school cleanup that we hope we can get the larger school community involved in. As well as that, we're going to try out a new fun event for the spring, which will be a Capture the Flag tournament that we're going to hold in the football field, and hopefully that will get a lot of people involved in participating. In addition to that, our other leadership groups are busy as well. We have senior leadership that is beginning their plans for commencement, including the interview process for senior speaker and planning the senior breakfast and all of those things that go into that. And our junior leadership is working on their plan for prom, which will be held at the beginning of May, of course, as well as MVP, which is our group where upperclassmen teach sophomores about dating violence and that kind of thing in health classes. And they are beginning their teaching for the second semester. And going on this week as well is the Iowa assessments that I fortunately no longer have to take, but I know the rest of the juniors and sophomores are very excited about those. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
You're almost giddy when it comes to that. Any questions for Arlo?
Arlo, do you know if the cleanup, is it planned at any particular stage or location or anything at this point yet?
I think we're planning on doing the grounds around the school, and we're talking about either holding it during the school day one day during a power hour or during Earth Day itself on that Sunday. We're trying to see which one would get more kids involved.
Okay.
Good, good question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Arlo.
Thanks, Arlo. Janelle, the newsletter.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Here once again with another great report on the great things happening. Definitely the big news since the last time there was a board meeting was the boys basketball state championship. And not what more can you really say other than that? But the Courier took some amazing photos, and I just wanted to share a couple that I thought were pretty awesome. So this was, of course, after the not really winning three-pointer. There was a three-pointer at the end of the game that solidified the win, but they were ahead by a lot anyway. And then this shot I thought was really great. This is the guy celebrating, so congratulations to them. I think having that championship game on the Friday night before we all kind of had some time off, they maybe didn't get as much kind of kudos or celebration, but big congratulations to the team and the coaches as well. Another big congratulations goes to Gary Coonan. He was named Athletic Director of the Year, and they had a ceremony during the state wrestling tournament to recognize him, and also Mr. Coonan announced his retirement. So it's going to be big shoes to fill having him as our athletic director. But in speaking with him and finding out what he has most enjoyed and what he's most proud of is definitely the percentage of students that are active and involved in either athletics or any other activities, the arts and music programs. He's been really kind of supportive across the board of all the activities in the district. And he was also proud to mention that there's been 26 state titles in 10 different sports in his tenure in the school district. So congratulations to Mr. Coonan on the well-deserved honor and on his upcoming retirement. We also celebrated Read Across America Day. There's a couple photos here. On the left there is Mr. Paul Lee. He read to a group of kids at Cedar Heights and dressed up as Cat in the Hat. It's celebrated on Dr. Seuss's birthday. Read Across America Day is. And then on the right there is Mayor Jim Brown. He was reading to a group of kindergartners at North Cedar. It's actually kind of a big collaborative effort. The Big Brothers Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa, along with the Cedar Valley JCs, Kiwanis, Rough Risers, and the Community Foundation Northeast Iowa all sponsor and help support that event. And I know some of you as board members were part of that as well. So thanks for your participation. We had a group of home students that went to the state capitol in February. You may see in that one picture, Mr. Dave Welter was the principal at Holmes Junior High. He's still involved with after-school programming and lobbying for the efforts of and the impact of after-school programming on students. So this is actually the after-school science club that went down and met with legislators, Representative Kressig, Rogers, and then Senator Danielson to talk about their experiences with after-school programming and the positive impact that it's had on them. So special thanks to Mr. Welter for continuing to be supportive and a part of our district and the great things that are happening. This info came from Mr. Strike at the high school. The high school math department sponsored the American Math Competition. It's a nationwide math competition for high school students. And this pictured here is the winner, Astoria Chow, and then there was 2 runner-ups there as well. So they'll be recognized as part of the Spring Awards Assembly. And kind of the big news over the weekend, the robotics regionals was held up at UNI in the McLeod Center, and it was 61 FRC teams from Brazil, Turkey, and then 8 states competed here in Cedar Falls in that Iowa regional. And this was a tweet from Dr. Batty there that says, "Congratulations to the Swart Dogs and the Iowa Regional Judges Award. Always proud of how you represent CF schools and your team. #gracious professionalism." So they actually, at a previous regional, qualified for Worlds, which will be in Detroit in April, which is what our Lego League team from Hanson qualified for as well. So we'll have 2 groups of representatives at the Worlds in Michigan. And then also kind of as part of the regionals, Blue Valley School District has a robotics team that I believe is actually part of their CAPS program. So Corey Moan, who's kind of the one that really is the one that started the Blue Valley CAPS and has really seen it grow and now is working to grow the CAPS network across the country. He was here supporting the robotics team, but then he also took some time to visit with a bunch of our CAPS students. So I think it's a really great experience to be able to have him come in, talk with our students, hear what's happening, what's working, and then give a lot of good input and insight then to Ethan and then the instructors as well. So he did spend a lot of time with students and instructors while he was here for the robotics regionals as well. And I just wanted to mention real quick some upcoming events that are pretty big events for our district. Next Monday night, April 2nd, is the All-City Orchestra up at the high school gym. Then on the 9th is All-City Vocal. That event is actually broadcast by Channel 15. It is the night of a board meeting. So the board meeting will actually be shown following the concert because they show that live. And then on Monday, April 16th is All-City Band. If you've not attended one of those events, go early. is pretty much what I can tell you, so you can get a seat. The great thing is we have wonderful music programs in the district and a lot of participation, and those are really full events. So, but we have those coming up here in April. And then just my always reminder, make sure to follow us on social media and all those channels, and then also across our buildings. Any questions?
Any questions for Janelle? Thank you, Janelle. Great information. All right. Moving on to item E, the Secretary's financial report. Mr. Nesker.
Again, I always am amazed by the student activities that take place in this district every month, and now you get to listen to numbers. So I know I'm sort of a downer, but we'll go through the monthly report for February, and start off with the general fund as we always do. And you can see our revenue and expenditures for the month, and we have an ending balance of just a little over $6 million. That's slightly ahead of where we were 1 year ago, so we're running pretty much on track. If you move forward to the management fund, you can see revenue and expenditures for the month. The big expenditure in management fund, which was a little unusual, is that we had a fixed asset inventory done of the entire school district. It had been quite a number of years that we had had an outside firm come in and specifically look at all the assets within the school district, and it was time to have an outside firm come in and sort of revalue what the district has, and so that's the biggest part of that expense for this month. Normally in February it'd be a pretty quiet month, but the last time we'd had an outside firm come in and do that, it was before I came here, so that kind of shows that I've been around a while, I guess, if it's been that long. In the capital projects fund, this of course is for the 3 elementary construction projects that are going on. You can see the revenue for the month, that's all interest received, and then the expenditures for the 3 projects, and an ending fund balance of about $15.57 million. And the 1 cent local option sales tax, you can see revenue for the month. Again, that's all interest this month, as the state has gone to this we'll pay you twice 1 month, then nothing the next month sort of cycle. And so that's just interest for the month of February. A few expenditures, those are associated with work that we're starting to do on the planning for the new high school over west of UNI, and then the transfer out for the revenue bond obligations that we have. You can see our ending balance just a little over $8.1 million. In physical plant and equipment levy, revenue and expenditures for the month, the big thing on the expenditures was a combination of different items, including work, some late bills that came in on the baseball field. At Robinson Dresser, we did buy a couple of school buses. Those sorts of things kind of tally up what the expenditures are for February. And you can see we ended up with just a little over $3 million in the bank, and that's a little bit down from where we were a year ago. Debt service, revenue for the month, that's a combination of property tax and interest received. And of course, there's that transfer in from Fund 33 for the revenue bond debt payment. And you can see no activities or expenditures for the month. You'll see that at the June monthly report. So our ending balance is about $2.19 million, and that compares to about 1.7 from a year ago. Student activity, a little bit more usual than normal on the expenditure side, but all in all pretty average for the month. All of our activities around state maybe had a little bit to do with the expenditures, and you can see where our balance is in comparison to a year ago. Trust and agency account, that pretty normal for the month of February, and we have a balance of $218,000. Food service, revenue and expenditures. Expenditures are a little bit up from normal, but if you'll recall from last month, they were down. So it's sort of cycled, it sort of evens itself out. Ending balance of $662,000, and you can see where that compares to 1 year ago. Coffee shop, you can see their activities for the month. They've got $6,400 in the bank. And for the River Hills Consortium, we did have a lot of revenue come in, expenditures coming out, and we have one a late tuition payment that'll be paid here in March. And with that, I would entertain any questions that the board would have.
Any questions for Doug regarding the Secretary's financial report? Hearing none, then the Secretary's financial report will be placed on file for audit. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Moving on now to the approval of the 2018-2019 school year calendar. Dr. Pattee.
Yes, we have a slide for this as well. This is the third time that the calendar's been on the agenda. First to talk about it and set a public hearing. We held a public hearing last meeting, and now we're asking for approval of the 2018-19 school calendar. It's going to look very familiar to most people. It is corresponding dates from this past year's school calendar. Iowa Code was changed roughly 3 years ago that prohibits schools from starting before August 23rd. You can see we are asking to start on Thursday, August 23rd. That will be the same date that Waterloo plans to start, as well as the Cedar Valley Catholic schools. We always try to work with them and try to organize that accordingly. The breaks and other professional development days are corresponding dates. I would point out, just because it is somewhat of a unique characteristic, the spring break is actually the third full week of March, which we talked about in the past. We always match that up with UNI, and it just happens to be, I forgot the number, but I think the 11th Monday or the 9th Monday of the year is when their spring break begins. And since the January 1st is on a Tuesday, this is just the cycle, the time when that falls into that third week of March. Otherwise, the hope is to be completed. You can see with the last day on May 27th. Again, it's a pretty consistent calendar with corresponding dates to this year's calendar.
Thank you.
May 27th? Isn't that Memorial Day?
29.
29th, I'm sorry, yes, I was looking from afar, and 29th.
Okay,
Thank you,
that's why I have these on.
thank you.
Are there any snow days built in?
There are not. We always add those to the end of the year.
Do I have a motion to approve the calendar?
I move that the Cedar Falls Community School District Board of Education approve the 2018-2019 school year calendar as presented.
Thank you, Eric. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jeff Hassman. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on now to the approval of the Hanson Elementary water main bid project.
I guess that would be myself. We have Aaron Ottelman from Modus Engineering is also with us tonight. I know we have a short presentation for everyone. If we can get that to pop up on the screen. There it is. This is a quick review of the project, replacement of the water main from 4th Street down to Hanson Elementary, and that water main line would be basically everything you see in red, sort of in the middle of the project, or on the screen, excuse me, and then the two boxes on the right side indicate a little bit more detail of how the water main would hook up to the work off of 4th Street, and how the contractor would work the intricacies of tying into the building on the lower right. What you see on the lower left is the yellow line. That's a new water main that was installed when the new and north wing was built at Hanson about 4 or 5 years ago. And so we're just basically talking about the red line, for lack of a better way to describe it. We were lucky enough to receive 5 bidders. I know this is a little tight, a little difficult to read, but our recommendation would be to accept the low bid from Dave Schmidt Construction from Cedar Rapids at a cost of $75,631. This is approximately $30,000 under our original estimate.
Approximately, our original was about 130.
Okay, so it'd be a little bit more than that. And anytime we can save some dollars out of the physical plant and equipment levy, we appreciate that. And we'd open it up for any questions that the board would have, either for myself or for Aaron.
Just as a reminder, we're doing this project this year because West 4th Street is going to be under construction, and I think actually closed today in front of that area. So we knew that working in conjunction with that work at this time would certainly be cost efficient and beneficial. This was a water main that did fail roughly about a year and a half ago. We did lose a day of school because of that at Hanson, so it certainly is necessary. It is original water line when that original building was built.
A lot of the uncertainties with the budget numbers came with just coordination with the city, and also there's some concrete removal up near the school that we weren't sure exactly what the direct path would be that the contractors would use and how much concrete they'd actually have to repair. So that was a big part of the conservativeness with on the budget number, and also we worked with local contractor, both plumbing and directional bore, just to get an idea of their budget numbers, and everybody's number was a little conservative, so once you add everybody's conservative number together, then it gets a little higher than expected. But we had a good turnout, and it should be great for the school, being under budget.
Thank you, Aaron.
Do we know why it was so much lower, this particular bid, than the others?
So we consulted Dave Schmidt. They were the low bidder, and we walked through just different aspects of the project to make sure they had everything. And they did acknowledge they had a mathematical error, but they are standing behind their bid, and they said without any hesitation they'll provide an excellent job, and they're standing behind their work. In the grand scope of things, this is a fairly small project for them, and they're doing developments out in by Aldridge Elementary, so they're in town. So with their mathematical error, they were still low bid. It was just a little closer to the second and third place, but they felt comfortable going through with it, and they have no issues, and they said they'd provide an excellent job.
Thank you.
Mobilization helps immensely in something like this. They are here, they're in town, they have the equipment, and I think that makes a very significant amount of difference within the overall bid.
Certainly.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the Hanson Elementary water main project bid?
I move to accept the bid of $75,631 from Dave Schmidt Construction, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for improvements to the Hanson Elementary School water main.
Thank you, Sasha. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Eric. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you for being here this evening. Moving on now to item H on the agenda, the approval of the custodial supply proprietary bid.
Okay, this is our annual request to the board for proprietary items, and these are items that are only offered by one distributor because of territorial arrangements that they have with their manufacturer for items. Primarily, what is on the bid, and the biggest item on the bid is paper towels and toilet tissue that are used throughout the entire district, as well as soap and some other items that are a part of the multi-dispense systems where you will go into the system and it locks in and you tell it what you need, you push the button and it drops the proper amount into the bucket and that sort of thing. This quote is a little bit higher than what it has been in the past. It's $163,936 this year. It is approximately $30,000 more than what it was last year. But the biggest reason for that increase is because I didn't touch a thing. Oh, there we go. Mrs. Leeper will I didn't touch a thing.
I'll back you
Okay.
up, Doug.
But remember, board, that we are opening up a 10th school this fall, and so the amount would be higher than normal as we're buying supplies for 10 school buildings throughout the district, not 9.
Oh,
All right. Do we have any questions regarding the custodial bid?
I have just a quick question. Since the paper towels are such a high dollar item, has there ever been consideration of other kinds of hand dryers, the electric dryers, or to try to eliminate the paper use?
We have considered that in the past, but it's been the decision of our Buildings and Grounds team that paper towels are the way that they want to proceed to move forward. I know that when Aldrich opens up, that's set up for paper towels. It's not wired for hand dryers, excuse me, and that sort of thing. It's something that we continue to look at, but for right now, our recommendation is to continue what we're doing, and we haven't really had a lot of requests to switch to the hand drying type of system. It seems like everybody prefers the paper towel.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve the custodial supply bid?
I move to approve the custodial proprietary supply bid from Martin Brothers Distributing in the amount of $163,936.49 as presented.
Thank you, Susie. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Jeff Orvis. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Moving on now to the 2018-2019 school year budget proposal and to set a public hearing. Doug?
That would be me again, and so now we will talk about budget, and if we can bring the presentation up, thank you very much. Kind of a little bit of a background about school funding in Iowa and how it works. The funding formula has been developed by the legislature, and you can see the different bullet points on the screen. The idea behind it is that it's supposed to bring some equity in expenditures. It brings property tax relief, and it's pupil-driven, and it does provide for some local control and discretion, but probably the most important items are it establishes a maximum spending control for every school district in the state, and it is the same formula that all Iowa K-12 public schools and area education agencies use. So all of us work through the same process to develop our budgets, or all of our school districts do that. The four key factors associated with the school funding formula are enrollment, like we talked about. That is based on our number of students that are in attendance as of October 1st, which would have been October 1st, 2017 in this latest case. It provides for equalization, and that the legislature establishes the cost per pupil, and that amount is nearly equal. There's been some conversation about that in the media lately about the disparity of cost per pupil between districts across the state. But that disparity is less than 4%, if my memory serves me correctly. So it's not considered to necessarily be out of balance when you look at that. The legislature and the governor established the annual increase in supplemental state aid. And so that then basically sets the expenditure ceiling for each school district spending authority, and it basically tells the school district how you're going to receive the funds to fill that spending authority. And then the fourth point is balance, and that's the ratio of property tax and state aid supporting the budget. Will vary by district. And we'll talk about assessed valuation per student a little bit later in the presentation, but generally speaking, those school districts that have a higher assessed valuation per student will kick in a little bit more property tax than the school district that has a low assessed valuation per student. And again, just to remind that from the legal perspective that Iowa Code Chapter 257.1 talks about how the funding formula will work, and it breaks it down into 4 different determinations, which is the funding formula, calculates the spending authority, again, as we talked about. It determines the maximum spending authority, and it comes up with the property tax state aid mix. So we'll start off with certified enrollment. Of course, that's the big driver for everything across the state. And you can see our certified enrollment as of October 1 last year was 5127.5, which is slightly down from the previous year. And you can see the history of our enrollment. The red bar indicates those Cedar Falls students attending school in Cedar Falls, and you can see the gold bar on top is for those Cedar Falls students that are going through open enrollment out that are attending other districts. special education is a big part of the total cost of the budget for the school district, and this is a historical perspective by percentage of the number of special ed students by different weighting level that are in the school district. And you can see we're starting, after quite a number of years of decline, we're starting to see an uptick in that, and that will eventually mean most likely a larger special education cost and potential increase in special education excess costs over revenue received as we move forward in the future years. What we are showing here is a history of supplemental state aid that the district received and what the state has set. The gray line at the bottom is the state amount, and then the red line up above that is what the district has received. And you'll notice that from 2 years ago until next year, there'll be quite a significant drop in what the school district will be receiving in state aid in comparison to what it's been in previous years. On the far left, that is the difference between, that was the last year of open enrollment for children that were attending Price Lab School, and so I'm showing the difference between what we would have received without those children and what we received with them. And just a reminder to everybody that all those dollars that were received were sent to the University of Northern Iowa for Price Lab School. District did not keep any of those dollars. One thing we always like to do when we talk about things across the state, and in our district is no exception, we like to talk about how do we compare to other sized school districts. And you can see that this is a comparison of school districts with five larger in enrollment and 5 less in enrollment than what Cedar Falls is. You'll note that Cedar Falls has an asterisk behind it. That means we are in the budget guarantee for next school year. We haven't been in the budget guarantee as long as I've been here. I think if I remember right, it was 14 or 15 years ago before Cedar Falls, that's the last time Cedar Falls was in the budget guarantee. And you'll notice that 2 schools below Cedar Falls, that would be Muscatine and Burlington, they continue to be in it for the second or more years in a row. And you can see in the case of, I believe it's Muscatine, they actually will have negative new money for next school year because they have continuing declines in enrollment. Received this, this slide was not in your packet when it was sent out on Thursday. This came out this morning. And I thought it would be appropriate to throw this slide in at this time. From the Iowa Association of School Boards shows the number of school districts that are in the budget guarantee for next school year. That if this calculates out to be about 54% of all school districts in the state will be in some form of budget guarantee for next school year. And so we are not alone when we talk about us being in that budget guarantee. It's a combination of enrollment, but it's also a combination of the amount of state aid that the legislature and the governor are sending to school districts. So this slide tries to show a cumulative 3-year change in certified enrollment, and as you can see, the Muscatine, which is just to the right of Cedar Falls, they've lost 234 kids, and so that's why they are in a negative situation for supplemental state aid for next year. And it kind of gives you an idea where Cedar Falls lands in comparison to those schools with enrollment 5 larger and smaller than us. And this is the supplemental state aid amount. It's the average. The Cedar Falls has received an average of just over $1 million over 3 years. Unfortunately, that's not what we will be receiving for supplemental state aid for next school year. And we'll kind of talk about that as we get a little bit further in the presentation. And of course, when you're talking about property tax and what's the property tax going to be rate going to be, and what are the dollars of property taxes are going to generate for the school district, it all starts with assessed valuation. We've been very fortunate in Cedar Falls that, especially in the length of time that I've been here, that the assessed valuation continues to grow at a nice rate for us. That's not always the case with different school districts or municipalities across the state. The red bar is what I would call the regular assessed valuation, and then of course the gold on top is the TIF amount that's added onto that for the total assessed valuation. Just a quick snapshot about TIF and what it's used for. Basically how that works in our case is we get to count the base evaluation from the prior year in a TIF district, but any increase in value in the TIF area is considered an incremental valuation, and that goes towards the TIF project. So that's sort of the, in real basic forms, how a TIF works. And then we talked about assessed valuation per student. You can see that in this case, Cedar Falls is the red line, and the state average is in the gold line. We've been running a little bit below state average the last couple of years, but we're starting to catch up as the assessed valuation in the community is growing. Another reason why we've been dipping below the state average is as the number of students rapidly increases, your assessed valuation doesn't always keep up with that at first. A 3% assessed valuation, as an example, when you have a 140 student increase in 1 year, will tend to drop your assessed valuation per student down a little bit. So, and that's why you see the red line for Cedar Falls the way it is. I'll go back to 2014 for a minute. That bump is the year that a significant amount of TIF valuation rolled off, and then back in 2015, or in fiscal 15, it came back on. So that's why you see that bump or pyramid in the middle of the graph there. So what I've done here, this might be a little bit hard to read for everybody at home, but this is a net assessed valuation by class. The one thing this graph does show is that over the last couple of years, the percentage of residential has decreased from just a little over 77% to just under 72% for next year. And the amount of commercial industrial has increased from just under 17% to roughly 22%. So as the community continues to grow and as new developments, and especially in the commercial industrial come into play, that has sort of changed the mix a little bit. The multi-residential has held pretty steady between 3.3 and 4%. Everybody was a little bit nervous how that was going to work, especially with the rollback that's involved with multi-res. But as you can see, it's sort of stabilizing out, and now it becomes a little bit more of a easier predictor as we move forward. Here's assessed valuation per student based on our neighboring school districts, and you can see Cedar Falls is pretty favorable. Janesville always consistently on a per student basis is a little bit higher assessed valuation per student, and as you can see, the state average on the far right, we're slightly below that. Here's the 3-year comparison to see how that has worked with our neighboring school districts and ourselves in the state. And this one maybe is a little bit more appropriate. This is the assessed valuation for the 5 schools larger and smaller than Cedar Falls. You can see that with the exception of Ames, which has what I would call almost obscene assessed valuation per student for a large school. We rate pretty well. College Community, for those of you that don't know, is on the southern side of Cedar Rapids, down by the airport. And of course, they've got a lot of, with the corn sweeteners and all the other major industrial area on the south part of CR, that sort of tends to raise their assessed valuation up a little bit. They're a little less residential than we are. But everybody else, as you can look at that, Cedar Falls compares pretty favorably from an assessed valuation per student. And then, of course, there's the 3-year average for that as well. So when we start getting into the meat of this, the combined district cost is $6,738 per student for next school year. Now, how that is determined is by legislative action, and it's been in code for quite a number of years. Every school district in the state has to levy at least a minimum of $5.40 per thousand, and that's what's called the uniform levy. And so you can see that generates approximately $1,691 per student for Cedar Falls. And then the state comes in and backfills into the foundation level, which for next year is $5,894 per student. And that amount, and then you add the supplemental state aid property tax replacement payment. And what that means is the increase in supplemental state aid is always a combination, or historically had always been a combination of property tax and state aid. Well, a few years ago, the legislature said that they would cover 100% of that supplemental state aid increase to help reduce property tax rates across the state. So when you add the two items together to get to that 5984, you can see that the state will really be kicking in about $4,183 per student, and then this local school district needs to backfill the difference, and that's another $864 per student until we get to the 6738. And in short, what it boils down to is the state's going to be contributing approximately 62%, and the local school district 38%, in the case of Cedar Falls. There is a quick glance of what our cost per pupil has been, and you can see that has sort of slowed down a little bit over the few years as the legislature has not been able to fund at as robust of a rate for supplemental state aid as they had historically in the past. Here's our combined district cost property tax state aid mix. I would note that the last couple of years, the property tax percentage is sort of creeping up a little bit, but then that's reflective again of that previous graph where we showed that our assessed valuation per student is creeping up closer to the state average. And so that's just a natural result of that. So there's the aid and levy worksheet, which the board all has a copy of. That is about 400 and some lines of Excel spreadsheet. And so we're going to try and break that down into some pretty small pieces for everybody to understand. The $5.40 per thousand that every school district in the state of Iowa needs to levy, in the case of Cedar Falls, that's $10.4 million in round numbers. Then the budget guarantee, or the 100, or some people call it the 101 guarantee. In our case, that's $128,551, and you can see that that's about 6.5 cents per thousand. And so the final, and then the final state aid foundation payments, $31.36 million, but that amount includes teacher salary supplement, professional development, teacher leadership compensation, early intervention, and the property tax replacement payment. I'd start singing the 12 Days of Christmas, but that's the wrong month. Then the additional levy, now that's the part that if you'll look back on the graph earlier that I talked about, to backfill the amount, you can see there's the calculation to come up with that. The short of it is it's another $5,384,000 in round numbers, or an additional property tax rate of just over $2.69. So to kind of bring it together, there's the uniform and the additional levies, $15.797 million, or just over $8 per thousand. There's the $128,000 for the guarantee. That's another 6.5 cents. The dropout prevention program that the district's been operating for quite a number of years, the board approved that back in November, and that was $855,000. That's 43.8 cents, which is actually less than what we projected when the board approved it. So the total for this piece of the budget is $16.78 million, or a property tax asking of $8 and roughly 60 cents per thousand.
And Doug, this is the part we have actually very little control over.
You have control over the
dropout prevention.
the guarantee. You could say no to that.
Okay.
And you also have control over the dropout prevention. You could say no to that as well. That is two pieces of the puzzle that the board could say no to.
But that's 50
or
cents,
choose
50
not to
cent,
fund.
50 cents out of a total
Right.
of
And-
$860.
Correct.
So this primarily, this is set by the legislature. We're on the rails, and this is pretty well set.
Formula
Correct.
driven.
Yeah.
And we'll have a slide a little bit later in the presentation that shows the actual percentage of the total budget that the Board of Education directly controls compared to everything, and that would be either voted or state mandated.
Okay.
So we'll get to that a little bit later as well. So, and I do have to do something about this yellow bar. I'll have to fix that graph for next year. But here you can see compared to our neighbors, our combined district cost tax rate, and you can see that for this current school year at $8.24 per thousand, Cedar Falls did have the lowest combined district cost tax rate in the area, and we're even lower than the state average in this case. When you compare that to our similar sized schools, again with the exception of Ames, with their $600,000 per student assessed valuation, we stack up really favorably in comparison to what other school districts are having to come up with for their combined district cost tax levy. Here is a bit of a history to show that in dollars, and so you can see what the amount is. On the far right, you'll note that there's a little bar that talks about the guarantee, but basically you can see that those are the dollars that are generated, and here you can see the tax rate. And the tax rate has been pretty consistent to slightly decreasing depending upon the year a little bit, so we've been trying to keep that pretty consistent. Instructional support levy, now we have to include the instructional support levy as a part of the general fund for reporting to the Department of Ed. But internally we do, it has its own separate fund and we track it separately. And real briefly, we'll walk through the formula that it's 10% of our regular program district cost. That's the $3.467 million. The state says you have to subtract off the state aid for ISL, which is for next year 22.7%. So that brings us down to $2,679,889. There will be no state aid again for next year for ISL. It's in the code of Iowa, but the legislature has chosen not to fund that for quite a number of years now. So our actual net state aid, or excuse me, ISL property tax dollars are the $2,679,889, and that's roughly $1.28 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. Here you can see the revenue that'll be generated by that for next year, and then here you can see the tax rate. Again, the tax rate in the ISL has been remarkably consistent over the last 5 or 6 school years. So hasn't really varied more than a couple of pennies over that time period. Cash reserve levy, which is also a part of the general fund. Now there are 2 parts to this. The first part are those requests that the district makes to the school budget review committee for different items, and you can see this board approved requests for open enrollment out increase that we have for this current school year, English language learner that we have enrolled in the district beyond 5 years, and then limited English proficient excess costs that gets reported on our certified annual report, as well as our special education excess costs. Again, all those items were brought to the board and they were approved in October. Total SBRC 1 is about just a little over $1.2 million. And then SBRC 2 is basically cash flow and other requests. We'll talk about the cash flow first. That's $600,000. That's the same amount that we are levying for this current school year. If you'll recall back in our report about financial report where the district was landing, our cash amounts, leftover amounts were starting to get a little bit light. Our solvency ratio was starting to drop fairly significantly, and the amount of cash that we have on hand is a direct driver of what those ratios are. Our net cash days ratio was down as low as it's been in quite a number of years. We expect that to improve this year with the additional cash that we levied for this current school year, but we would also like to kind of bring that back up to the district's goal, and that's why we're asking for the $600,000 again. The other part of that is that we are going to be opening up Aldrich next year, and we're going to have some expenses associated with that. And we will be going to the school budget review committee. You can request a startup cost for new elementaries, for new school building, not tear an old one down and replace it, a brand new building, and that's our case with Aldrich. And we will be going to the SBRC for that in the fall. There's no guarantee that they will approve all of that, but historically they tend to do that. And again, what that does is it gives us the authority to make those expenditures, but it doesn't provide the cash. And that's where a year from now, you will see other SBRC approved requests. There will probably be a dollar amount in there if the SBRC were to approve that. So that's, so we need some cash to kind of get the ball rolling for that, and then we'll have that request coming in another school year. So our total cash reserve levy request is just over $1.8 million, or just under 93 cents per thousand property tax asking for that. Here is the dollar amounts that we have levied historically. You'll see that we're not asking for as much in cash revenue for next year as we have for this year for the cash reserve levy. And you can see that the property tax rate then would be also decline in comparison to what we're levying this current school year. So in summary, when you go through all the points that I just talked about, the combined district cost, the budget guarantee, the drop, you can read all of that. $21.27 million, or $10.80.8 per thousand. I did not fudge those numbers to come up with a 00 on the end. That's just sort of how it worked out. So I wanted you to know that. And here you can see the operating fund revenue in the general fund, including ISL. And it's up not quite $300,000. And then you can see the tax rate. And again, that's the 1081 is the same thing it was in the 16-17 school year. That it just happened to come out that way. And if you'll look, 3 of the last 5 years, it's been $10.81. So I'll talk a little bit about a commercial industrial replacement. You can see that the legislature and the governor approved that back at, starting in fiscal 2015. And then in beginning with this current school year, they capped the amount of dollars that were going to be available for city and county governments to collect for that. We're going to estimate 95% of what we received this year for next year. And we estimated 97% for this year compared to the previous year. So you can see as we're looking at what we think we're going to get for C&I money, we're kind of throttling those estimated dollars back a little bit. There's been some talk in the legislature whether the legislature is even going to fund any of this. That obviously is a concern for us, but it's a larger concern for city and county governments that rely a little bit more heavily on these dollars. So that is something that we're all sort of watching with trepidation, I guess I would say. And here you can see the calculation. I won't go through that in a great detail, but you can see that for the general fund, with how we're calculating it, we're expecting about $481,000 or $482,000 in C&I payments, and then for the instructional support levy, it'd be about $76,000. So if the state were to eliminate that, then that would be a burden. In our case, that would be a burden that would get dropped back on the property tax holders. Okay. This shows the changes in, or excuse me, the amount of other local revenue that we're going to receive, or maybe another way to call it, the state of Iowa has this marvelous term called miscellaneous income. And so that's where the miscellaneous income would come from. One thing I want to note, there's a slight change in the open enrollment tuition. This year we're throwing regular students that are in the regular ed program as well as students in the special ed program in the open enrollment tuition. In previous years we had these open enrollment students that were in the special ed program. We threw them in a special ed tuition, but there's been a request from Department of Ed on how we expense or code those changes, so this is reflective of that. The dollars would still be there, just that the bars would maybe be as long to the right. And you can see the other dollars where they'll come from. State revenue, there you can see the combined district cost on the top. This year I broke down all the major categoricals. Last year we kind of had lumped everything except the 4-year-old program into one number. And this year I wanted to kind of break that down to show everybody the exact dollars are coming from each categorical. And we've talked about, last fall we talked about school districts not spending their categoricals. Well, you can see the categoricals add up pretty quick if you're not spending them, and we want to make sure that when we show carryover amount or unspent authority amount rolling into the next year, that's a true number. You'll note that I always show two numbers. One's the total and one's after we subtract the categoricals out. And you need to watch that because you don't want to be upside down having the categoricals drive your unspent authority.
So Doug, sorry, on the previous slide, our open enrollment tuition, about $2.3 million, or 2.6 million. So that number hasn't really grown in the last, I guess I should phrase it as a question. I don't think it's really grown in the last couple of years, correct? Because we've had to limit the number of open enrollment students that we could admit because in the elementary levels, we didn't have the room for them.
There's two factors associated with that. One is yes, our open enrollment has declined. And I think because of what we've had to do with enrollment or capacity restraints, that's had a bit to do with that. The other thing you have to remember is that the amount of dollars that we receive is based on the previous year's cost per pupil, state average cost per pupil. And of course, when supplemental state aid has been growing at 1 or 2% or 1.1% per year, that's going to really throttle that amount down as well. So it's sort of a combination of factors. And here's the federal money. The one thing that we're pretty nervous about, we're budgeting $400,000 for Title I for next year, but there's no guarantee we're going to get $400,000. There's some things going on at the federal level about Title I funding for in the future, and we do have a number of Title I teachers, and some of them are already being paid for through the dropout prevention programming. And so any decrease in Title I funding will put additional pressure on the district's savings account or reserves to cover those costs for that programming. And then, of course, the other big one is Medicaid. And, of course, that's the net amount that the district has after filing for Medicaid claiming. We just looked it up today. Basically, for every dollar in Medicaid claiming that the district files for, we net 51 cents. So between what the state gets from DHS and then 6 cents of that goes to the contract that we have for the provider to does all the paperwork for that on our behalf. So we really net about 51 cents out of every dollar that we claim for. And we do expect that to continue to grow. It's great kudos to Jill White and her team for continuing to do that. Those dollars 100% of those dollars offset our special ed excess costs. So when we talk about special ed excess costs, think about what that number would be if we didn't have those dollars. So in the general fund, you can see this pie graph shows that about 55% of our total dollars are going to come from state aid, the federal at about 3.26%, and local, which is a combination of property taxes and those other items that we talked about in the previous slide, is about just under 42%. So that's it for the general fund. We'll walk through the management fund real quick. Again, a reminder that the management fund is a restricted fund and it only can be used for the items listed on the screen, although this district does not have any expenses for early severance. We're asking for $600,000 for next year. That's a drop of $100,000 roughly from the previous year, or from this current school year. And you can see it's just under 31 cents per thousand. And there's the C&I replacement dollars that we'll receive is estimated at about 15,500. There you can see quickly the revenue that have been requested over the previous years. You can see there's the drop of the 100,000, and then you can see the drop in the tax rate as well for the management fund. In the physical plant and equipment levy, there's two parts to that. The board controls the first 33 cents per thousand. That's called the regular levy. And then the voters did approve an additional $1.34. They voted for that in December of 2016. That levy now expires at the end of June of 2028. And you can see the different items that it can be used for. That's not an all-inclusive list, but it's sort of the major items that PEPAL fund can be used for. Just as a side note, you cannot use the PEPAL fund for payment of salaries or benefits. So it is restricted in that way. There you can see what the dollars that the PEPAL would generate with the $1.67 levy, And then there's the estimated C&I replacement payment within that. Dollars received, there's a historical perspective of that, and then here's the tax rate, and of course that's been very steady over the last 9 years at $1.67. The debt service levy, and again we use that primarily to pay the district's long-term debt. Just a reminder that the community did approve a $32 million bond issue in April of 2016. We sold those bonds in February of 2017. We actually sold them for 19 years, not 20, thanks to the folks at Spear Financial for working with us to be able to take a year's interest off of those bonds, and you can see the interest rate was just under 3.08%. For next school year, we need $2,423,200. That's principal and interest payment, and that would be a tax rate of just over $1.16 per thousand, and then there's the C&I replacement payment of just under $69,000. There isn't much history because this is only the second year we've done a debt service levy, and you can see the dollars we're asking for, very similar in amount, but you can note that the property tax amount is dropping by about 2.5 cents per thousand.
And assuming that our assessed values continue to increase, that rate will continue to
That's
decrease.
absolutely correct.
Okay.
Because when the debt structure was established, we were extremely conservative in what we believed that our assessed valuations would grow by.
I think if you recall last year, the $1.18 actually was about 4 cents less than what we anticipated it being within that first year. So it's starting to decrease at a rate that we anticipated now.
So in summary, what we're trying to do is we're pulling everything together here. You can see the general fund amount, then there's instructional support, and then the other funds. So the grand total is $27,778,452, or a tax rate of just under 13.95 per thousand. This graph shows historically where we're at. The dashed lines on the last 2 years shows what the amount would be without the debt service levy, and then of course the top line or the red line includes that. But you can see that we're down from the year before as far as a total property tax levy asking. One of the questions that one of the things I always like to show is where's your money go from property tax. So for every dollar you pay in property taxes, you can see almost 57 cents goes to combined district cost, just under 9 cents for debt service, and you can sort of read the rest of them as you go around. The budget guarantee is actually less than 1/2 of 1 cent per thousand, to give you an example of where the dollars would be going. And again, Director Haspin had asked this question before. The combined district cost is, of course, controlled by the legislature and the governor through the school funding formula. That's the 58.87%. The citizens of the community have graciously blessed us with a voted PEPAL instructional support levy and debt service, and so that's another 23.4. And so what the board actually controls, which is the dropout prevention, cash reserve management, and the regular PEPAL and the 101 guarantee, is 14.7% of the entire budget. This is a little hard to read, but I'm trying to show by percentage over the last 3 years and for next year where the dollars are going in comparison to the previous year. Property tax comparison, this shows rate and where it goes, and you can see that our property tax asking would be down a little over 32 cents per thousand from this current year. That's about a 2.25% rate deduction from this current school year. And then you can see the revenue, and again, this is a little hard to read, but the big change is that plus $272,545, that really is all in the combined, almost all of it's in the combined district cost. This breaks it down a little bit better to show where the dollars are actually going to be going to come up with that amount. We're reducing the cash reserve levy, again, $333,000, but again, we did not have an enrollment increase, so that's a part of that. We're reducing the management levy. We levied $700,000 for this year, anticipating some increases, and it ended up being that all our insurance rates went flat. And if you'll recall, we talked about that last August or September, and then you can see the rest of it there. So we're very, very, very fortunate that we'll be able to kind of mitigate the property tax asking and the rate comparison quite a bit. This shows how Cedar Falls compares with our neighbors above and below us, and you can see with the exception of Pleasant Valley, for this current school year, we have the lowest property tax rate of the 11 schools on that graph. And I do not believe Pleasant Valley has a debt service levy, or if they do, it's a very small amount. And that would be, and you can kind of see where the breakdown is with that. And of course, how we end up eventually calculating the rate is determined upon assessed valuation of an individual property owner's value, home and property, excuse me. And then there's the Code of Iowa that talks about how the rollback is determined. Basically, it can't change by no more than 4% increase in any 1 year, with the exception of utility property. And that rate's determined by the Department of Revenue, and it's the same for all counties in the state. So you can't move from one county to another in Iowa and get a break on your rollback amount. Here's the history of that. As you can see, it's been increasing rather steadily until 2015. Then it bounced up for this current school year, and then it's going to go back down for next school year, which helps with determining what the tax rate's going to be, because it changes the assessed valuation. Now, this is a simple calculation based on a $100,000 property value, and for simplistic sake, you can see that the tax rate on a $100,000 home with the estimated homestead, and how that homestead is determined is you take the total homestead amount that's available to a homeowner, and then you divide it, or multiply, excuse me, times the percentage of your total property tax bill that's stored for the school district. So that's how that amount's determined. So you can see that we're looking at a total for a $100,000 assessed value home of almost $37 for that home for the year. And I get asked about, well, what about larger values? Well, there's what you can see for a property for a $200,000, $300,000 residential home, what the property tax changes would be. And then a couple other things that we'll need to do this evening. One is the budget guarantee. The Code of Iowa requires a resolution that the board must approve for that, and you can see the resolution there on the bottom of the screen. The words "if necessary" are put in there simply because if a lightning bolt strikes and the legislature does something different between now and when they adjourn and we don't need it, then we don't have to levy for it. So that's why that language is in there. And then there are the timelines for the budget that we need to file, and we're going through that tonight. And then, so assuming the budget, the board sets a public hearing for the next board meeting, we'll have the budget in the paper on Wednesday. The other thing that we need to talk about is an amendment to the current year budget, and you can see there's two sections of the Code of Iowa that allow for that. And the amendment is to cover budget amounts that were unanticipated when the budget was developed a year ago, but it is not an increase in property tax asking of any way, shape, and form. The district needs to use other sources of revenue or reserves to cover those anticipated budget amount increases. And so for this current year, we're asking only in one section of the budget, and that's instruction, and you can see the amount that we're asking for. And quite honestly, almost all of this is due to the fact that the board will recall back in, I believe it was April last year, we approved almost $750,000 in expenditures for new network equipment throughout the district, switches, hubs, radios, all of that. That was supposed to arrive in June. It arrived in July. And so that's why the expense actually trickled into this current school year instead of last school year. So the dollars were allocated in the PEPAL fund for last year, so they just carried over. If you'll recall, when we went through the PEPAL, or through the CAR report last fall, you'll notice that expenditures in the PEPAL fund were less than what they were the previous year. That had a big piece of why that was the case. So there was a little bit of staffing adjustment, but the vast majority of that request has to do with that equipment. Okay? And of course, when you have an amendment, you have to have a public hearing, and of course, those are the same timelines as we would have for the regular budget. And I know that that's a ton of stuff that I've laid out. I tried to do it in a way that is understandable and as quickly as possible, but I would certainly entertain any questions that any of the board members would have.
Any questions for Doug?
So there's two kind of short phrases that we always like to hear. We heard one of them earlier, and that is under budget with the water main project. And then the other phrase is tax levy decrease. So that's the other one that this kind of encompasses, and both are extremely positive.
Would mention that although it is positive to have a tax levy decrease, that we always want to make sure that we adequately fund the needs of our school district and make sure that when state dollars don't come through, we have to back that up with property tax and other means.
Well, we're doing what we can based on what the Code of Iowa allows us to do.
Thank you. Do I have?
Can I just ask one more quick question? Do we have an idea whether we would be on budget guarantee next year, year after? Is there a way to predict what that might look like?
That all comes down to now enrollment. And 2 years ago and 1 year ago, we had much larger enrollment increases than we anticipated. This year, we were relatively flat. Overall, Doug showed you that our overall increases were roughly about 45 students per year, and I think last year's was right around 140 students. So what happens is that ebbs and flows. Our enrollment projections show that we're where we believe we should be based on the higher amounts the previous 2 years. Next year, as we look at those trends and we look at some of our enrollment numbers and some of our registration numbers, we anticipate that going up and increasing. But we won't know that fully until really the first day of school when we have our students in our seats and in our buildings. And then the key date, as Doug pointed out, is October 1st, because that's the official count day when they actually utilize that number for the following budget forecast and numbers.
The October 1 date is I guess what I call a line in the sand day. And of course, we've got continuing to have students move in and move out of the district. And I know that Carrie had said that between October 1 and October 31, we had, what, 30 more children?
30 more students.
Something like that. And we were unfortunately on the wrong side of that deadline or line in the sand. I can tell you we've had some years where on the count day we've had a family of 6 roll in. And so you win some, you lose some. And unfortunately for us this year, we were on the wrong end of that deadline. They just moved it to October 15th. It used to be September 15th, so I mean it's changed around a little bit, but that's kind of how it works.
Well, yes, our trend lines look like they're pointing in the right direction, certainly. We just know that as we look over the summer, we look at our kindergarten sections and in our elementary sections. I think our smallest right now grade level at the elementary is about 415 students. All of our high school sections grade levels are 380 or less. So we anticipate that continues, and we have 2 sections or 2 grade levels at the elementary that are 450 students or larger. So we have more students coming in than graduating. It's just now how many more will we have next year?
Good. Do I have a motion to approve the 2018-2019 school year budget and set a public hearing?
I move that the Cedar Falls Board of Education direct the Secretary to publish the budget estimate and notice of public hearing as required by law in the Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, and that the public hearing for the 2018-2019 proposed budget be held at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, April 9th, 2018 at the City of Cedar Falls City Hall, 220 Clay Street, Cedar Falls, Iowa, 50613. And this budget consists of, would you like me to read all of the detail of this?
If you want to, you could just read the total if you want to.
All right. So the total in 2018-2019 estimated expenditures is $87,832,174. and the estimated amount necessary to be raised by property taxation is $27,778,452.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Susie. Do I have any more questions or comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank
Doug,
you.
I would be remiss to speak and just know that I know that you are so instrumental in putting together this budget, but I know that you have a team behind you that helps, and that you are a great leader, and you have an amazing team. So thank you for all you do for us, and thank you for simplifying this in a way that hopefully the community will understand it, but know that they can call if they ever have any questions about the budget or something they see on TV.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you. I appreciate those, and I'll let my team know. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, moving on to item J on the agenda, 2018-2019 school year budget adjustment resolution. Do I have a motion?
I move that, if necessary, the Board of Education of the Cedar Falls Community School District will levy property tax for the fiscal year 2018-2019 for the regular program budget adjustment as allowed under Section 257.14 Code of Iowa.
Thank you, Jenny. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Jeff Orvis. Do I have any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on now to item K, 2017-2018 school year budget amendment, and set a public hearing. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Cedar Falls School Board of Education set 5:30 p.m. Monday, April 9th, 2018, correct? Thank you. At the City of Cedar Falls.
Thank you.
At the City of Cedar Falls City Hall, 22 Clay Street, Cedar Falls, Iowa, as the time, date, and place to hold a public hearing to amend the current 2017-2018 school year estimated budget expenditures for instruction from $42,751,853 to $43,577,509. Reason being for technology, equipment, and staffing.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded by Susie. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Moving on now to item L on the agenda, the superintendent's report.
Just a couple different items. Our next board meeting is April 9th. That is when we will have the budget hearings. April 23rd will be the following board meeting, and we'll have an informational report. More than likely at the April 9th meeting as well, we will have kind of our 5-year technology plan update for the board as well, and more than likely have members from our technology team to be able to talk about some of the work that's been going on in those areas.
All right. Any questions for Dr. Pattee?
Real quick, since we're all quite the little planners, what is the last day of school?
That is a really good question, and that is something that we are, as of now, currently, it's June 4th. We are trying to explore and look at if we move that, the last day with students, to that Friday, which would be June 1st. We're still working on that just to finalize if there will be additional inclement weather days and have that potentially transition into a non-student day, but more of some of the work that we have around professional development. So right now we are saying June 4th, but as long as the weather cooperates. Luckily, the winter weather that we had fell on a weekend. Arlo and other seniors might disagree with that statement. But right now, June 4th, but potentially we could adjust that as we look at the end of the year. Based on the fact that we're an hours-based calendar, we have multiple additional hours built into our calendar, and we have some needs as we look at professional development as well, which could be very well utilized at the end of the year if we can.
Thank you.
All right. Do I have any questions or comments or concerns from board members at this time?
I wanted to bring up that there's another educational savings account bill in the legislature right now. This one's in the Senate. The first one we experienced was in the House. So just wanted to remind the public and reiterate that we passed as a board a resolution supporting the funding formula the way it is right now, and just remind everybody of that.
I think it's important to note that, again, that came out of the Ways and Means Committee, the Finance Committee, and those are funnel proof. So came up kind of late in the game, and certainly we hope I think the number of parents that came out to help advocate on behalf of public schools and funding for public schools, I think, is important, and we hope that continues.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
I move that the Cedar Falls Board of Education enter into closed session to discuss the purchase or sale of particular real estate only where premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price the governmental body would have to pay for that property or reduce the price the governmental body would receive for that property. The minutes and the audio recording of a session closed under this paragraph shall be available for public examination when the transaction discussed is completed under 2017 Iowa Code 21.51J.
Thank you, Susie. Do I have a second?
Second.
Here's Jeff.
Seconded by Jeff Assman. This will be a roll call vote.
Okay, Mrs. Coyle,
Yes.
Mr. Giddens,
Yes.
Mr. Hassman,
Yes.
Mrs. Hines,
Yes?
Mrs. Lieber, Mr. Orvis,
Yes.
and Mrs. Wolpert.
Yes.
Okay, I would ask everybody associated with this closed session to leave the room. For the viewing public, the board will be going into closed session. When we return from closed session, we will immediately adjourn. So this, in essence, is the end of our broadcast this evening. Thank you.